Okay, so it's 7:05, so I think we can start now. I'll admit people as and when they come in. I'll share the screen. Can one of you please unmute and let me know if I'm clearly audible and if my screen is visible? Anyone? Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm audible, right? Okay. Let me know if at any point my screen becomes stops showing or if I become inaudible. Okay, so good evening everyone. Sorry, normally the session starts at 6 p.m. but today I had some work commitments, so I had to postpone it to 7 p.m. So my name is Aishi and I'm the PMRF research scholar for this course, PMRF TA for this course, Introduction to Professional Scientific Communication. And I'm currently in my second year of PhD in the Department of Chemistry, IIT Bombay. And today we'll be discussing some assignment questions that will hopefully help solve some of the doubts that you might be having after the lectures videos, and it will also help you solve this week's assignments. So let's hop on to a very interactive session. So I'll move on to the first question. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So the first question is, effective scientific communication helps to. So these are the four options that we have. Spread the discoveries or inventions to heterogeneous audience, spread awareness about importance of science to a layman, get critical inputs on the shortcomings in the study, and all of these. So heterogeneous means like the audience is not homogeneous, like not audience consists of people from different fields as well, not only from your own field. So that's what heterogeneous means in context with reference to this question. So what do you think is the correct answer? Anybody?
All of,
Sorry?
all of these.
Correct, yeah. So effective scientific communication, that's why is very important, because you can not only doing experiments is not only important, you have to actually effectively communicate whatever you have, um, what are the experiments you have performed, the context of doing that study, and what are the implications of that study, and how you are contributing to the knowledge regarding in that domain. So that's why scientific communication is so important. I've seen people who are like exceptionally good in understanding literature, doing experiments and all that, but when it comes to communicating their data, communicating their results, they are not that good. So it's a learning process. Nobody is born as a great scientific communicator. So obviously we learn from it. That's why our supervisors are much more advanced in this, because they have lots of experience, much more than us, and we're all learning at this point. So effective scientific communication, basically this course, that's why it's so important, because you have to not only discuss your data with people who are really established in your field, but you have to actually spread awareness about whatever you're working on to the layman. People who are not from your field, people who are not even from science, should know the importance of your study. They should at least understand why you're doing what you're doing and what you're trying to find. So that's why effective scientific communication is so important. Correct. So moving on to the next question. The image given here represents one of the paradigms of a research project that defines the various steps one should follow while planning and executing any research work. Identify the option that correctly identifies the image and the code of the shown image. So this diagram is from your lecture slide. So what do you think will be the answer from among the options?
First option.
Enquiry wheel, correct. So I'll talk a little bit about the enquiry wheel and how it came to existence. So there were three people called Rafe, Harwood, and Philipson who developed this model of scientific inquiry called the enquiry wheel, and it's based on information gathered from practicing scientists. It's just not a random thing. They've actually gathered information from scientists from different fields, and this model is actually pretty well described in their paper, a scientific method based upon research scientists' conceptions of scientific inquiry. And you can go through that paper if you want to. And all of this paper was basically based on interview data described in the scientists' conceptions of scientific inquiry. And the informants in this research were actually 52 science faculty members in 9 science departments: anthropology, biology, chemistry, geography, physics, applied health, geology, medical sciences, environmental affairs, from different departments. And the faculties were from a large Midwestern university, and they were basically interviewed using a protocol that was designed to probe their conceptions of scientific inquiry. So the interview basically began with the question, "What is your definition of scientific inquiry?" And they had a lot of related questions. Then the interview finished up with an opportunity for the scientists to revise their definitions of scientific inquiry after articulating ideas that came up during the interview. And then transcripts from these recorded interviews and field notes were reread and discussed as the data were collected and coded. And it was very apparent that concepts and descriptions from one interview often corresponded to concepts from another interview. So thus categories and concepts regarding the process of scientific inquiry emerged and led to the description of this, what we call the scientific inquiry wheel. And I think it's very fascinating that majority of the scientists that were interviewed, I think 38 to 40 out of the 52 scientists who were interviewed, they identified the most important aspect of an investigation as being the literature review, the literature based aspect. To them, a worthwhile investigation was one that crossed the boundary from the known to the unknown, and a knowledge of the literature is very important in identifying that boundary. So there were various stages of scientific inquiry. So as a result of these interviews, the investigators described the process used by these scientists as they pursue research as a wheel with questions at the hub and at various stages of the inquiry in a circular arrangement around the hub, as you can see from this sketch as well. And they note that the process of scientific inquiry can begin from any stage, and that stages may be revisited as often as the particular inquiry requires. They also state that all stages will be engaged at least once during an inquiry, and that the force driving the inquiry is an investigator's questions. So these three scientists, they also point out that the stages that occur during an inquiry did not follow the circular path found around the periphery of this inquiry wheel. In fact, a scientific inquiry may begin at any one of the states around the wheel. Even the process of communicating the results of one investigation can prompt questions from the community that lead to another investigation. That's how science works out, right? Whenever you're communicating a result, people come up with more questions and more researches can be carried out. And the observations in this stage are not those obtained while carrying out the study. Rather, they are the observations that generate questions. These include observations resulting from using the sets in the field or in the laboratory, from reading the literature, or from normal sense of curiosity. And defining the problem based on their observations, knowledge of the literature, and communications with colleagues, scientists identify this problem. They must then decide, based on their experience and that of others, what problems are capable of resolution and worth investigating. In some cases, these decisions reflect not only the input from the scientific community but also input from society. Forming the question, many times a problem is turned into a question that serves as the focus of an investigation. However, in textbooks, describing the scientific method, defining the problem tends to be followed sequentially by forming a question. In fact, the results of the interviews in this study suggest that any of the stages in this inquiry wheel could lead to new or revised questions. And then there's a point called investigating the known. So reading the literature or communicating directly with other scientists allows scientists to define the boundary between what is already known or published and what is unknown about the issue. The authors then cite a medical scientist who described this process as moving from the certainty to the uncertainty. And their informants place a high value on seeking answers to questions that have the potential to extend our understanding from the known to the unknown. Then there is this point called articulating the expectation. One second. Articulating the expectation. So what do we mean by that? A knowledge of what is known about a question and understanding of the answers to related questions guide a scientist in developing a preliminary answer to the question or to developing a revised question. And these preliminary answers are the hypothesis or the scientific method as commonly described. Then moving on to the carrying out the study. So after planning and designing an investigation, scientists seek an evidence-based answer to the question. And each scientist chooses from the various methods that are appropriate to their own discipline to conduct a study. Then moving on to interpreting the results, which according to my personal opinion is a very important, one of the most important parts of conducting a study. So they say that for some scientists, this is where science really begins. And a health scientist explains that he thinks that too many people think science is collecting data in the lab. But what he tells his students is that science begins after you have collected the data. These are the final stages of checking procedures, going back to the literature, synthesizing data, taking a step back from the data, sharing results, are places where meaningful discoveries can be made. And then you move ahead to reflecting on the findings. And again, to quote the authors, they say that unlike the interpretation stage, where findings deal with what the results say, reflecting on the findings determines what the results mean. And this reflection involves trying to find significance in the data, looking for patterns in the data, and thinking about how it might connect to other known information. Then finally, you move to communicating the findings. and if information is not shared with others, then it may as well not have existed. So this is the opinion expressed by a geographer who stressed the necessity of communicating findings to both the scientific community and to general public. So communication does not just happen at the end of an investigation. Scientists communicate with other scientists throughout most investigations. And the authors of this paper also note that a second and also important audience for scientific information is the general public. The gap in the public's perceptions of science and how to obtain scientifically valid information concerned some of the people who were interviewed. And then there'll be questions. The authors describe the inquiry wheel as a process that is fueled by questions that spark investigations, and questions are obviously the core of the inquiry wheel. So this is how some interviews from 52 candidates, faculty members from a known university, actually led to the formation of this model. So you're right, it's inquiry wheel, asking questions. Yeah. So this is what the inquiry wheel entails. So moving on to the next question. Sorry. Malfunction. Yeah. Identify the option that describes the option in which a person begins with a known claim or broad opinion and then determines what follows. Judgment essentially begins with the hypothesis and investigates the possibilities within that hypothesis to achieve a conclusion. Which one do you think is the right answer? In which kind of reasoning do we begin with the hypothesis? Anyone? Most of the scientific, quantitative scientific work follows this process only. Which reasoning does starts with hypothesis building?
Deductive reasoning.
Yeah, correct. It's a deductive reasoning. So this is the general schematic of inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. In inductive reasoning, you observe some things, you find a pattern from those things, then you make a hypothesis and then theory. But in deductive reasoning, we have a theory, we have a hypothesis in mind, and then we try to formulate experiments to show, basically demonstrate the hypothesis, and then we lead to move ahead to confirmation. So this is mostly followed in scientific communication, deductive reasoning. So theory, hypothesis, observation, and confirmation. So I think someone asked in one of the last sessions, I think Mayur asked that is it possible to actually combine these two reasonings and give, like, are there any examples where people have combined both of these and have that led to something? So I have that example today. I'll probably discuss it at the end of the session. I don't think he has joined. We can have a discussion at the end regarding this. So I'll move on to correct, it's a deductive reasoning. So moving on to the next question, which of the following options is correct with regard to the type of communication that the image is shown here represents?
Verbal and visual, second option.
Correct. So the first one you can see, so one is speaking, so that's verbal communication. Second one will be non-verbal communication, not visual exactly, because you're not verbally communicating, and it's not like signboards or something. You're actually shaking someone's hand. That's a kind of non-verbal communication. You're not visualizing or seeing something. Had it been some kind of signboards or some kind of presentation or something where it's only the visual sense is needed, that's when it's visual communication. This is a non-verbal communication, since basically you're shaking hands. You're not talking, you're not verbally communicating, you're not voicing your opinion, you're shaking hand, and you're probably agreeing. When do people shake hands? Either when they're greeting each other or they're agreeing on something. When people generally make a deal or something, that's when they shake hands. They're agreeing on something. Or they're trying to, when people are meeting for the first time, they shake hands to greet each other. When people are introduced. So that's a kind of non-verbal communication. People are agreeing to something and they're shaking hands to seal the deal, basically. So B will be a kind of non-verbal communication. Yes. So moving on to the next question, which of the following represents visual communication from the 4 options that's given? Anybody?
All of the.
Yeah, pretty much. A bar diagram is obviously visual communication. Nobody is speaking, or it's not a gesture. Bar diagram is generally plotted to showcase any kind of easily to when you are doing any kind of experiment. You are trying to compare different samples. Basically, a bar diagram can be a very good way to plot that. An image showing human tissue structure, that's also visual communication. You will take an image in a very high powered microscope, and then you'll probably show it to someone else. That's obviously visual communication. A text slide for acknowledgement. Slide, it's their slide written, so that's, I'm guessing it's from a presentation. So presentation, I think that's the difference between presentation and report. In any kind of presentation, visual impact is very important. When you're submitting a report, people expect it to be like very long and very essay like and stuff like that. But when you're presenting something, there are two senses from the audience that are bound to be at work at the same time. People are seeing your presentation and people are hearing you talk. That's one of the feedbacks I had received reading one of my when I was starting to present for the very first time. I actually put a lot of text on the slide. I was trying to present a paper, already published paper. One second, I just admit someone is here. So I was trying to basically talk about present a paper, and I put some images and I put the entire legend and entire stuff from the image on the slide only. And the reasoning, in my defense, I thought I won't remember because it was a huge nature paper, and I thought I won't remember what this stuff means. And I was really just starting out in this field, and I obviously read through it, but I did not have that much knowledge to understand what this data meant. So I was in my first year of bachelor's or something, and it was really a very humongous job for me. So I wrote down everything in the slide, and the first thing it was during my internship, and the first thing that the supervisor told me is, please don't write so much stuff on the slide, because presentations are mostly meant for the visual impact. You put images on the slides, maybe one or two sentences, very briefly you show flowchart kind of thing, make it more attractive, visually attractive, put slides, put images, put maximum one or two sentences. The font should be big enough for people even sitting on the last bench so that they can see, and whatever is happening in the image, that's your job to speak. You will put the laser pointer, you will show the difference in the image, whatever you're trying to focus at, and you will speak. You cannot write everything out there and read from a slide. That's not how presentations work. So that's one of the feedbacks I receive, and I still follow that to this day. Whenever I'm making presentation, I keep it in mind I should not put too much on the slide, because if my audience is wasting time reading the slide, they'll not listen. They're seeing my slides, they're reading. If they're also reading with concentration, then they won't listen to what I'm saying. Normally what happens, people see the slide, see the image, and they listen to what you're saying. That should be the proper way to present. So yes, a text slide for acknowledgement, slide definitely for visual communication. Visually you're communicating to someone about this. So yes, all of these will be the right answer, correct. Moving on to the next question. The statement, Rocky is a black dog who bites strangers. Every black dog I met bites strangers. Therefore all dogs bite strangers is an example of the other four options. What do you think? What do you think is the right answer? I'm giving some hint. There is some kind of observation from which a pattern is seen, and then the person is making a hypothesis.
Inductive.
Yeah, correct. So that's why it's an inductive reasoning. That person is observing that Rocky is a black dog who bites strangers. Then he has seen that every black dog that he has seen bites strangers. So he has seen a pattern. Not necessarily, obviously not every dog will bite strangers, that's very common sense, but according to what he has observed, his perception is that every black dog he has met bites strangers. So that's a pattern that he has noticed, and that's how he is forming this hypothesis that all dogs bite strangers. So it's the inductive reasoning, because you are moving from observation, then you're seeing the pattern, then you're moving ahead to hypothesis. So that's why it's inductive reasoning, correct. Moving on to the next question. Which one of the following statements is true with regard to the hypothesis? With regard to the statement hypothesis, like not statement, the word hypothesis. What do we mean by hypothesis? So these are the four options. What do you think is the correct option? So generally in scientific studies, we start with a hypothesis. We go through the literature, we find the gap in the studies, and then we we write research proposals, right? So we start with the hypothesis, we hypothesize something. So let that be a hint. What do you think the hypothesis, what does that word mean?
Second option.
Yeah, correct. So hypothesis is basically a proposed explanation for a phenomenon made as a starting point for further investigation. So it can be right, it can be wrong, that your experiments will determine, or your experiments will lead to more questions. That's very usual in science, but obviously it's not exactly only the observations, and it's definitely not a well substantiated explanation acquired through scientific method. It's just a proposed explanation. You propose a hypothesis. That's why it's called research proposal. Statement of purpose, research proposal. So you propose a hypothesis based on your literature work, and then you move ahead to demonstrate that. So that's why it's called a hypothesis. So correct. Also, if anybody else has a different opinion, please to unmute and let me know. We can have a very proper discussion, because as I said before also, like, it's a very, this course is very like that only. You can have different opinions, and it might be that more than one answer might be true as well. So I would definitely like to hear your opinion as well. So moving on to the next question. Which one of the following is not an effective way to communicate? One second. Sir. Let's see. Okay, let's answer. So this is the question. Which one of the following is not an effective way to communicate science to non-specialist audience? Non-specialist, of course, obviously means people who are not from your background, people who are not from your domain, people who are not from science in general as well. So which do you think out of these four options is not an effective way to communicate science? So what one of my supervisors always recommends is that when you're trying to explain, give a talk, always give a talk to someone who's not from your field. So I would suggest you do this also. If you're working on something, just make it a habit to explain this to your parents. If they're not from this field, you have to make sure that they're not from this field, or your grandparents. Try to see if they understand what you're doing or what you're trying to explain, because you might be discussing these things with the lab members and supervisor on an everyday basis. They are in this field, they'll understand. But if you're able to successfully communicate to a non-specialist person, then I think that's an art. Not everyone can do it. Even big, like very big popular and famous researchers, I don't think even they can do it. It's a very different art. So you have to effectively communicate to non-specialist audience. So what do you think is the right answer among these four? Anybody?
Option.
Option?
Using technical terms won't be appropriate, ma'am.
Yes, correct. Because technical terms, someone from physics background will not understand someone from like pure bio. If you're using very bio oriented terms, someone from physics will not understand. Same vice versa. Someone from physics background will use a term and I'll be completely clueless because I won't understand. Then I'll have to go back and tell them. Even when I meet some of my colleagues who are from different departments, metallurgical, someone is from design, someone is from physics, someone is from chemical engineering or mechanical engineering. Even we talk, we try to explain it to each other, and they're like, okay, I'm not understanding everything, but good job, you're doing well. That's the problem, because they don't understand what I'm saying, because some words we are using on a daily basis and we are using it with our lab mates and with our supervisor. We are so used to it, then we are like, how can I explain this without using this particular word? It's not possible at all. So that's how why using technical terms is very wrong. And these people are still from science background. They have at least learned all these science subjects till 12th, I'm guessing. Imagine people from other backgrounds, not from science or from other backgrounds, commerce or arts, they'll not understand anything. Vice versa, we'll not understand their terms. Someone from commerce background can come and talk about stuff that I'll not understand. They are very different terminologies. So they'll not understand at all. So for them, using analogies and visuals are very important. Visual presentations help a lot. If you can give analogies that this thing happens in your subject, the same thing happens in mine. That's a very great way of giving an explanation. Keeping the story simple, obviously that's always recommended. Even when you are talking to a specialist audience, that's recommended. Avoiding jargons is basically technical terms only, so you should always avoid jargons. So I have already told this in one of the previous sessions, but I'll say this again. So there's a competition that's very popular in Australia, US also, I guess. I know about Australia. It's called the 3-minute thesis. So you can go on Google and search 3MT or 3-minute thesis. You can go on YouTube and search, and you can see basically the rule. It's little self-explanatory. You have to explain your thesis in 3 minutes. That's the only time you've got. You have to show one slide only one slide, and you have to explain it in 3 minutes. And the audience will have people from every background out there. There'll be people from humanities as well. So in 3 minutes, you have to discuss your thesis. You have to present it to the audience. You have to avoid jargons and all that. So I'll suggest please go to YouTube and search. You'll find great presentations, marvelous. People from Yale have presented, people from University of Melbourne, Monash University, they have presented. Please go through any of the topics you're interested in and see how they do it. I think that's a very great practice to, to keep the story simple and to stop, how to learn how to avoid jargons. Like, you won't be able to do it at the first try, but you'll learn. That's how it works. So yes, your answer is correct. Using technical terms is, it's not an effective way at all to communicate science to any kind of, like, you people from your background might still understand, but non-specialist people will not understand at all. So yes. Moving on to the next question. The image shown here is an advertisement for one of the consumer products. In the advertisement image, the person with white color coat represents. So anybody? These four options. Anybody would like to try?
Ma'am, I have answered like social status, but it has went wrong for.
It's research and development. Like, when we are seeing such kind of advertisements, basically what they're trying to show, that there is a doctor who's recommending this toothpaste, right? There's a doctor who has basically, doctor has more knowledge about, dentist basically, in toothpaste ads, who have more knowledge about teeth and everything, more knowledge than us normal people, and they are basically trying to, they are the form of research and development shown in this particular ad. They are showing that people who are working on this, people who have regular practice in, checking people's teeth, and basically dentists, whatever the job is, so they are also recommending this toothpaste. So this, for this particular advertisement, they are giving this dentist looks. It basically is a demonstration of research and development. So they are trying to show that even people who are deep into research, or people whose job is to look after our teeth, dentists, they are also suggesting this toothpaste. So this will be research and development. Yes. So moving on to the next question. This series of images serves as an illustration for, again, like, anybody who's will try. Anybody?
Inductive, ma'am.
Yeah. Why? Because there's a pattern. Yeah. So there's, whenever this kind
Yes.
of, yeah. So there's a pattern of stuff over here. You can see one, then it becomes three. Basically, a triangle kind of structure is formed, and the number increases correspondingly. So that's a pattern that you see. So that's kind of inductive reasoning. Yeah. Moving on to the next question. The image given below represents. What do you think this represents?
Visual communication.
Correct. So it's not verbal, nobody is speaking, nobody is communicating with the help of their voice. It's not written exactly, because people are not writing notes on the side of the road and telling them ki, this is a U-turn, not a U-turn, or please don't cross the road over here, or this is a one-way road, or please stop, or something like that. This kind of visual communication. They're using signboards to show what should be done, what should not be done. So this is kind of visual communication, definitely. Next, this is also a similar kind of question only. This image represents one of the commercial advertisements for a product. Here we identify the leading man who's wearing a white coat and a tie. Anybody? So it's very obvious from all of the four options. It's definitely not a modeling career, or it's not a head of the family thing. It's basically research and development. They're trying to show that there is a doctor who's recommending Dettol, because they're trying to show that people who are working in this field, people who are scientists, or maybe like doctors, these people who are regularly checking patients' health and all that, even they are also recommending Dettol, because they are saying that Dettol is a better germ protection soap than any other soap available in the market. That's what they are trying to promote. So the person in the white coat represents research and development. Moving on to the next question. Which one of the following options is a true definition with regard to finding discovery in science? So anybody?
First option, ma'am.
Yeah, even I think it's the first option, finding something that had not been known before. Accidental outcomes can also be be true. because I think the penicillin thing by Alexander Fleming, I'm not sure that was an accidental. That was an accidental discovery. So sometimes people are actually working on something else. They're also working on trying to find something that has not been known before, but they actually end up finding something else. So accidental outcome can also be termed a discovery, but the first option is more relevant in context to this question. That basically making discoveries, basically you're trying to find out new knowledge. There's novelty in your work, something that has not been known before, something that has not been published, or something that has not been demonstrated before. So even I think the first option is most relevant in context to this. Right. So moving on to the next question. In the statement, I was born in India. India is the seventh largest country by area and the second most populous country in the world. The text given in red and green color fonts represent respectively. What do you think it represents?
Second option, ma'am.
You think given a new concept? Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, that's the given a new concept. I was born in India. That's a concept that I'm giving to the audience, to the reader. Then I'm building on that concept to show that I was born in India. Then I'm talking about India. That India is this, and that. So that's a new thing that I'm adding to the sentence based on whatever I've said before. That is, I was born in India. So it's an example of given a new concept. So this is how generally write-ups should be. You should not start be abrupt in your write-up. You should build up to that level. You should not be abrupt with each sentence you write. It's easier for the readers to connect with you or to connect with the article or anything you're writing if you're building up to it. Like just how a storyline works. If you're writing a story, if you randomly introduce characters and you randomly start talking without introducing them properly or without saying what is happening, then that doesn't make sense. You have to build a story. That's what research is. It's basically building a story. You have to figure out the storyline and you have to write it like a story so that people are actually genuinely interested to read, to see the climax of the story. What is happening? Why are you doing this? And what is the end point? So that's the climax. So people should be interested and fascinated enough to read till the climax. So this kind of concept during writing is pretty cool. Yeah. Moving on to the next question. The term scientifically acceptable general principle based on experimental evidence. Hypothesis, theory, law, common sense. So I know people will have different opinions on this one. Even I am a little bit dicey.
Theory.
Okay, yeah. Even I think theory makes more sense, but I am pretty sure some people will also think law. So I've tried to show what the difference between theory and law is. So scientific law basically describes what happens, and scientific theory explains why or how it happens. And scientific law is above any kind of questioning. People have said that it happens. It has been seen to be happening mostly, and that's above questioning. But scientific theory can be there are scientific theories that can be questioned. So what they're saying online is that a scientific law describes the behavior of something that occurs. It is often described in mathematical relationships. They do not require experimentation for verification. Laws are general statements for which no known exceptions exist. Mostly no known exceptions exist. But a scientific theory, however, attempts to describe why that thing is happening, why something works. And it is the proposed explanation that best fits a wide range of observations. So there are observations, people have done experiments, they have shown observations. So they are basically kind of proposing an explanation that is fitting a maximum range of observations. So theories are never proved. Proved is a very strong word. Proved is like there is nothing you can question above that. So they are basically never proved as such, proved, but maybe modified to fit new evidence that has been found by scientists. So theories do not become laws. So that's what they are talking about. So law is something. Law and theory, I know the terms are generally sometimes can be used interchangeably, but this is what those mean. When you say prove, you are actually saying something that's above questioning. So that's the difference between law and theory. So this question, I think theory is more fitting. Option theory is more fitting for this question. Yes, you are correct. So moving on to the next, we have already discussed. This is an inquiry wheel. So I'll not discuss this again. This illustration shows what an inquiry wheel is, and there is a proper, as I discussed, there is a people who have joined late. So there is a proper paper where they discuss how this inquiry wheel came into existence. There was a study that was carried out with 52 faculty members from different science disciplines: anthropology, biology, physics, chemistry, medical science, geology, chemistry, whatever from a midwestern university, and basically some interviews were taken, and whatever the data from the interviews were taken out, and they formed this model called the inquiry wheel. So you can just go to Google and write inquiry wheel and the paper will come. So that's, if you're interested, you can go through it. This is the inquiry wheel, which means asking questions. It's basically the model for asking questions. Moving on, which of the following definitions of hypothesis, this also we discussed, yeah. This is also a repeat question. This will be a proposed explanation for a phenomenon made as a starting point for further investigation. It's definitely not observation based, and it's definitely not a well substantiated explanation. It's a proposed explanation. When you're writing a research proposal, you point out some gaps and you hypothesize. You're giving a proposal. This might be what is happening, and then you use that as a starting point for your further research work. Yes, so this also we discussed in the last class. In writing a research paper, the term hourglass concept refers to, anybody? If you remember the hourglass way of writing.
The structure of the research paper.
Correct. Yeah, you were saying something different? Someone else was also speaking. Okay. So yes, she's right. The structure of the research paper with a general overview. That's how an hourglass is. Oh, I have not added the hourglass image. So you can go and check how an hourglass looks like. You start with a very broad general overview. Basically, you're talking about introduction part. You're giving a broad introduction. Then you have to narrow down to a specific aim. Then you're narrowing it down to what gaps you have seen in the research, what you are proposing to work on. Then the results and objective methods. Results, these are very narrow, only specific to your work. Then you move ahead, and the base is also very broad. That's the discussion part. That's how you interpret your results and how you put that in context, and how you discuss those results with respect to all the data that has been published before. Basically putting everything in context. So that's a broad base of the hourglass. So that's basically the structure of a research paper. Correct. So moving on to the next question. Several summers ago, there was a Scotty who went to the country for a visit. He decided that all the farm dogs were cowards because they were afraid of a certain animal that had a white stripe down its back. In this sentence, the text given in blue and red colored fonts represent, respectively. Anybody?
Ma'am, I had given it as theory and hypothesis, but actually the answer is given and new concept.
Okay, can you explain a little bit? Why did you think it might be theory and hypothesis? Okay, I get it. Acha, okay. So you're saying that several summers ago this thing.
So that is what I thought. Like maybe
theory.
he decided about visiting a place, and that's why maybe.
Okay, yeah, they decided that all the farm dogs were cowards because they were afraid of a. Acha, you're saying that that was kind of a hypothesis that he came up with, that they were afraid of a certain animal. That's why they with the stripe down its back. That's why he decided that all the farm dogs were cowards.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, he decided that all the farm dogs were cowards because they were afraid of a certain hypothesized. Okay, but I understand where you're coming from. Now that I read it, even I had thought of giving a new concept only. I'll tell you why I thought given a new concept, because I like this. There's a given concept. They're talking about someone who's Scotty, and then they're basically building up, they're talking about more stuff based on this Scotty. Also, they're introducing new concept based on a given concept. That's why I thought it was a given a new thing. But now that you said it and I reread the question, I get where you're coming from. So you thought that he hypothesized that they were afraid because they had seen someone similar, and that's why. So that might be, but I think the key word here is he decided, because he's not forming any kind of hypothesis. I think so. Why given a new concept might be a better option, because you see he decided. So that might be, when you're proposing a hypothesis, you're basically giving a proposal. You're not exactly sure if it will turn out or not turn out in the right way or not. We're basically hypothesizing something. But here it's written that he has already decided. He has decided, and he believed that that all the farm dogs were cowards because they were afraid of blah blah blah. So I think that this decided might be a key word with this, but I understand where you're coming from. So that's why I say these questions are this course only is very subjective. Like different people will have different opinions. So that's what makes this course really interesting. And thank you so much for saying what you mean. So now that I reread it, I can understand where you're coming from. So that would have worked out if the decided word was not there. I think I would be 50-50 for both theory hypothesis. I would have been probably. So I think decided word, he's already decided that these things were happening, so that's why I think it's more the given and new concept is more relevant, I think. Yeah, but I understand where
Okay.
you're coming from, huh? Thank you so much. So next question, which of the following is an important factor to consider when writing a good materials and methods section? Anybody?
All the above?
All of
Correct.
the above, ma'am.
Yeah, correct. Obviously, when you're writing materials, the main agenda of the materials and methods section, when you're giving out something out for publication, is that someone else will be reading through your article, right? That's the entire point. Someone else will base their own work on your work, build their own work on your work. You'll get citation, that person will get ideas. That's how it works. So the entire basic agenda is to basically write it in such details, in that much detail, so that someone who's starting out work, who will try to base their work on yours, should be able to replicate data. So replicate, like, should be able to work, follow the methods and methods and everything, and do work on their own. So, and even if you, I'll suggest, even if you're reading a paper and you have, you think that paper is very relevant for your work, and you see that the methods and materials, you see everything is fine, but you're confused about something from the methods and materials section, so don't be shy, don't hesitate, just mail the author. Even I was like hesitant when I heard this for the first time. One of my seniors were like, she was actually following a paper for one of her work. She was following, so that this paper they had developed a kind of program, and she has a program for analysis, image analysis basically, and she was doing all the experiments, images and everything, and she wanted to use that program for analysis. But obviously everything is not like, when you're using a software program, you can down, if it's free you can download it, but you have to actually learn how that program works, right? And not everything is there up on YouTube, and it was a very recent paper. Obviously not everything will be like, it's not as common as Photoshop or something that people will generally upload videos on YouTube. So she wanted to she wanted to use that software, but she did not know how to. So then she actually mailed the authors, and they replied. She mailed the authors that I'm not able to understand, I want to do this, can you really help me out? They replied, actually, that's a very detailed explanation, and they will reply because they will get a citation. You see what I'm talking about? So if she does this work and if her work gets published, she will obviously cite that paper, so they'll get a citation. So that's why whenever you're reading articles or something, if you think that that article is very cool and you want to replicate that work, you want to, or that article is very relevant for your work, don't hesitate, just mail the corresponding author. Who's the corresponding author? Tell them that I'm working on this, I wanted to use your thing. Can you just explain to me how you did it? I'm a little confused about this thing. Maybe don't explain your work in very detail. There's no need to explain your work to the fullest detail. Just explain vaguely that I'm working on this. I want to use what you have used in your paper. Just remember that your work is still unpublished. Their work has been published. So you can. They have published their work because they are giving out the information, and that published work is theirs only. No one can snatch it from them, but your work is still unpublished. So just don't be very frank and don't explain everything. Personal opinion, I'm just saying, you can do what you feel like. Just tell them that I'm working on this, I'm very interested in using your software, can you please explain whatever, and they'll reply, because they'll get a citation. So that's a win-win from both sides. So yes, so that's how a materials and methods section should be written, with very good experimental design, full details of statistical tests, full details of materials, all of these. Having said that, most of the papers I read, I don't think only after reading the paper I'll be able to replicate everything. Mostly what I get the most stuck at is the analysis part. The analysis, carrying out experiments is fine, they've optimized, you will see the concentration of things, you'll add that, you will centrifuge that, you will do whatever they have followed and all stuff like that. But then how you analyze the data, I think that's very very difficult and very important. So statistical tests, very important. So if any doubt, you can actually mail the author or a corresponding author and ask for any kind of explanation in a very polite way. Yeah, so this question will be all of these. Moving on to the next question. The majority of the papers published in scientific journals contain a section titled Acknowledgements, in which the authors recognize the contributions of individuals or organizations. Which of the following characteristics should ideally be included in the acknowledgement section? Should not ideally be included in the acknowledgement section. Anybody?
Last option, ma'am.
Yeah, correct. So that doesn't make any sense. Obviously, the sponsor who funded the research project, very important. Like, if you're reading through the acknowledgement section, you have to, like, give acknowledgement to them. They have basically funded the research project. Without their funding, you would not have been able to do anything. So definitely, and most papers do that only. All the papers do that. They'll actually say that I have received funding from Welcome DBT Plus, whatever, blah blah blah. So this is very important. Expert who read through the manuscript and provide critical input on the content, also very important. If you are giving it to someone who's established in their field and they are giving you suggestions, so it's very fair that you give them the acknowledgement at least that they have actually invested time to read through the manuscript and give input on the content. A colleague who shared some reagents for the study being written, very important, cannot skip that. So always, you don't have everything always in your labs. Sometimes you start your work, especially new labs, people who are starting out, new faculty labs, new, basically someone who's starting out as a group leader for the first time. So new labs, they don't really have all the research reagents. They don't even have all that funding, all that grant funding to support this this expense. So they take reagents from other labs, established labs who have the funding. So what they expect, that you give them a shout out in your paper. You're giving an acknowledgement that thank you to Professor this for being so kind and giving me, supplying us with this. This was a very, normally the way I have seen in paper, they write this thing was a kind gift from Professor blah 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 from this is that's how people generally write. There may be other ways to write as well, so you can always find a friend of an author who helped you financially these elementary school days, very thankful, but generally you don't include these kind of stuff in your papers, because that person doesn't have any that kind of contributory effect for your paper. They might have a very big role in your life in general, not might, they have a very big role in your life in general and where you have reached today, but for that paper, not so much. Moving on to the next question. Which one of the following options must be considered while writing any type of research proposal? Anybody? Someone trying to join? Okay. So, anybody? This question. Which one of the following options must be considered while writing any type of research proposal?
Clearly defining the objectives of the
Correct. Obviously, when you're writing a research proposal, you won't have the results. You cannot detail the results. Societal impact of the proposal, fine. If you have, the word limit, if you are not going above the word limit or stuff like that. Financial rewards, I don't think anybody writes in any kind of research proposal. Not worth it. Societal impact is something you can write, but only if you have there are word limits or stuff like that when you're writing any kind of research proposal, or page limit, something like that. So you can write in a very small sentence or something, but mostly the most important part is clearly defining the objectives of the proposal. That's the main thing of a research proposal. So the option A is the correct answer. She's correct. Moving on to the next question. Which one of the following is the correct order for writing a research article, and what is the acronym for the way of writing? So there is absolutely no correct order for writing a research article. The question should be which one of the following is the popular order for writing a research. It's your article. You have done the work. You will write the article. So you will decide what is the order. But there is a common order of writing a research article, and I'll tell you why. But definitely let me know if you have any other opinions. I would like to hear that. I'm actually interested in hearing that. So what do you think is the most common order for writing a research article, and why?
First option.
First option. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, can you explain why first option? I can understand the methods part. Obviously your work, you have done the experiment, so it's easy to write the methods. Why introduction before discussion, or discussion after introduction? You have any special reasoning for that? Okay, I'll explain my say
No, ma'am, I chose the option by looking to methods only.
Okay, okay. So the most common that people follow is the second option, which is introduction, method, results, and discussion. But the first option, even I would prefer writing the method section before introduction. Personal opinion. I would write the methods first, then I'll try to, uh, what will I say? Try to
Results.
assemble the figures. Figures, correct. Method section will be easy to write because I have done the experiments. I have my notebook, lab notebook, so I'll just write that first. Then I'll try to assemble the figures. Must have done the analysis. I'll try to assemble the figures. So based on the figures and based on that, I'll try to write the result section. Introduction, discussion depends, whichever is easier to write at which time point. But the most common is IMRAD or the second option, because introduction part is basically they're saying that when you're starting a work, you know the topic, right? Someone is working on SARS-CoV-2, so they write an introduction on SARS-CoV-2, and then they'll go on to the specific objectives. So that's why they have said introduction part is easy to write because it's something that you already know that you are working on. So that's why introduction. Methods and results, definitely. Then you go to the discussion. Discussion is basically how you're putting your work in context to the real world, or how you're putting your work in context to whatever has been published before. So that's why the most common is the second option. Personally, I would write the methods before introduction, definitely. But everything else I'll follow the second option only. But methods I'll also write before the introduction part. So that's if I'm given to write something. But what we can all agree on is that the abstract and the title should be written at the very last. Like when you'll have a lot of drafts of a manuscript. Like the first thing that you'll write, obviously you'll show it to supervisor, then he or she will give a lot of corrections, you'll move ahead, you'll do it again and stuff like that. The title and the abstract should be written at the very last. Both of them should be very catchy, both of them should be very self-explanatory, at the same time open to discussion. Like you have to write a little bit about what you're working on, why you're working on that. The abstract should be structured like this: a little bit of introduction, maybe 2 line, then you're writing what your objective was, then you're writing a little bit about what you have found out, major findings, what you have found out in 2-3 lines, and the last you have a proper scientific conclusion. So this is why we are thinking that this gene might be doing this, blah, blah, blah. So that's how you structure an abstract. But abstract needs to be very, very very crisp, very brief, because people read the abstract and they decide if they're going to read the entire paper or not. So that's why abstract should be very important. Title is very important. At one hand, you should include most of the details in the title, so that it's when people are searching for things related to your work, it's basically easier to locate your paper. And title should also be very catchy. Like people, when you're searching anything on Google Scholar or PubMed, only the title shows up, right? When you're searching something, you type a lot of keywords, the title comes up. Only if the title seems fascinating, that's only you open it, and then the abstract. So the title is the first barrier. If you cross that barrier, if people find your title fascinating, then they'll go to abstract. If they find the abstract fascinating, then they'll go to the rest of the paper. So one thing we can all agree on is title and abstract should be written at the very end, when you're almost ready to submit. That's when you should go through the entire paper and discuss with your supervisor or anybody senior or the other co-authors or whatever, and then write the title and abstract. Okay, anybody else has any different opinion would like to share, you're very welcome to do so. But second option is the most common. But personally, I would also write methods first. Yeah, that's some work you have done like recently, so you'll remember, easier to write the method section that way. Yeah. So I hope everyone is clear for this. Moving on to the next question. Sorry. Yeah. Anyone writing their first research paper will find the assignment intimidating and more difficult than the actual work. One advice frequently given to beginners is to begin writing simpler sections of the research paper rather than adhering to the exact order of the research paper. Identify the option that indicates the easier section to write first. Anybody?
Methods.
Yeah. For me also methods. Anybody else has a different opinion? I already explained why methods seems the most easy. Anybody else has any kind of different opinion? Welcome to see. Give me 1 second. Just pick up the pen. on to the next question. Journals often ask authors to provide keywords for their research papers. The reason being, anybody? Have you seen keywords in a research paper? I have seen. Not every research paper, but most of the research papers have keywords. So why do you think keywords are included?
All of these.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other opinion? Keywords are mostly used to index papers for an easy search. I don't think journals use keywords to rank the papers. I don't think so. And better keywords increase the impact factor of the journal. That also, better keywords will increase the visibility of the journal, might be, because when you're searching on a platform like Google Scholar where so many journals are available, so if you're writing some particular keywords, and if your particular paper which has been published in a particular journal has a better bunch of keywords, it's easier for that article to pop up. So that might lead to an increase in the visibility and the readability, like people will be reading your article more because the keywords are better. So when they're reading your article more, basically they're reading that journal, the journal's article more because of good keywords. So better keywords might increase the visibility of a journal. So when they'll find out that the first hit, when they click on search, and when they find out that the first hit is from the journal that you have published in, they find your article, they'll read the article, and basically the journal, then they'll see, acha, this has been published in this journal. So your journal will get a better viewership basically. But mostly it's important in indexing papers for an easy search. So if I'm working on SARS-CoV-2 lipid protein, I'll add some very relevant keywords so that whoever is working on SARS-CoV-2 lipid, they'll type something and my article will come up. So that's the main motive behind keywords. So good exercise, go back once and type random words on Google Scholar and try to see which papers come up, and do they have proper keywords, try to see which journals they are from, what's the impact factor of those journals. So that might be helpful. So the main motive is the second option, in indexing papers for an easy search. Next question, which of the following is the most read section of a research article? What do you think?
Title.
Correct. So there is nothing, no rocket science in this. Obviously the title, because that's the first thing that you see in a paper. If the title seems fascinating, that's only you'll go and read the abstract, and then materials and methods and results and all that. Materials and methods comes last, I think. Someone who's actually invested in that paper will go to materials and methods. Otherwise, title, abstract, a little bit of introduction, then discussion, then materials and methods. I feel that's how people skim through papers. So for this question, it will be title definitely. Okay. During the submission process for research articles, publications will frequently request extensive methodology sections as part of the article. The reasons for this are as follows. This also we discussed. But anyway, anybody?
Second option.
Correct. To give other researchers the opportunity to repeat the experiment and reproduce the findings. Correct. So the main objective is that only for the methodology section, that other people, you explain your data so that other people can actually replicate whatever you have done. So you have to explain your data to that level of that level of detailing and stuff. So yes. Next question. The following are the research. This already discussed. Which of the following is the correct sequence? So that's the last. This is also another way to write a research article. The IMRAD is the one of the common ways, but then I said that I write the methods section first. So the question is, which one of the following options correctly represents the popular sequence, however, which may not be the actual order in the final manuscript. So as I said, I'll select the method section first. So this is very open to discussion. The IMRAD sequence, the last one, also like we discussed in the last question, last one also comes. The first one, according to me, I'll write the method section first, as I said. That one also works. So for me, I think the first option might be correct for this one. So I wanted to talk about both these ways, introduction or methods. I think it's very subjective what you choose, but definitely not, nobody will start with discussion or results, I think. So the first option and the last option, I think, will be the most relevant for these type of questions. If anybody finds any other sequence more easy to write, let me know. Or if you think you have a different opinion, let me know once. Okay, next question.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, there was a question about the keywords in
Yes,
the
yes.
ninth question, ma'am. Can you please discuss about it, ma'am? Not this one, ma'am. Basically, there was a given text, and based on that, we were asked to select what's the best combination of keywords that's
Okay.
possible.
Okay, okay.
So, can you explain that question, ma'am?
Okay, okay. Oh, I don't have the question here. Okay, so basically, they are giving you a text and asking you what are the best choice of keywords, right? So I'll talk about my personal opinion regarding this is. So what's the main agenda of keyword? That's to help in indexing papers for an easy search, correct? So that's the main. People will come online. They'll type search for random topics in Google search or PubMed or any other Scopus, for example. Scopus is a very good database. If you want to search papers, just go on Scopus, write your keywords, and then you can select everything, the date, like you can write since 2020. If you want very recent papers, you can write since 2021. If you want even older papers to be included in the search, you can write since 2015 or something like that. Then you can actually choose the journal. If you want only nature papers to show up, you can choose nature. If you want only review articles to show up, you can actually choose that. So there's a lot of like how we go on any shopping website, right? We go on Amazon and Flipkart, we type what we want to see, we type random things, and then we choose the price range, we choose the company, we choose the brand, we choose there's variety of things in Amazon and Flipkart. So that's how you sort, filter, basically you filter through various options. So Scopus is a very great website for that, you can check that out. So in my opinion, keywords help in indexing your papers, because when you are using very relevant keywords regarding your study, that will help to find out when people, basically, suppose you are working with for example, you're working on any kind of lymphoma, suppose glioblastoma. You're working on patient samples, you're working on glioblastoma, and you're working on a particular protein or something like that. So it's, if you choose very selective proper words, there's no right or wrong rule over here. As I said before, nobody will say that you have chosen the wrong keyword, it's incorrect. That can never be an incorrect option. Choosing some other keyword might help in better visibility of a paper. So if you are working on glioblastoma, particular protein, try including these words, these important words in the keyword section. Glioblastoma, protein, that name of the protein. Then if you are working on any kind of particular samples, add that. So any kind of anything from that write up that you see is very relevant, very specific, at the same time will help others locate your research paper easily. That will be a proper keyword. So there's nothing called right or wrong in this, but you just have to, it also come with experience, that if I write keywords from, suppose I have written an article, I choose some keywords, someone who's more experienced than me will read the same article and will choose a different set of keywords. That might help in better that might help other readers to help, like better, that will help them to locate my article easily. So that's how it works. So try to mention things that you've worked on, glioblastoma, particular protein, or maybe suppose you're working on breast cancer, you're working on BRCA gene. I think it's very popular in breast cancer, I'm not exactly sure, I've read some papers. So you can add breast cancer, then you can write BRCA, the name of the gene. Then if you're doing some kind of proteomics analysis, you can write omics, proteomics. So when if people are searching for these words, they'll find, if they're searching proteomics breast cancer, your paper will pop up in the search thing. So that's how it works out. So there's no right or wrong. Maybe you have to go hit, like you can see through trial and error. You can talk with your supervisors, people who are more experienced. They might help you in selecting keywords for the paper. So that's how it works out. Okay, so
Okay, ma'am. Yes,
you can
ma'am.
actually do try Scopus though. Even this was recommended by even Google Scholar. I think they have some options to filter. Google Scholar has a date thing since 2021. You can choose review article or research article, but Scopus has a lot of filters. So you can basically filter through everything, and like if you're looking for one particular journal only, you can do that. That's amazing. So go through Scopus one and try adding different keywords. Maybe what you want to search is same, but try adding different keywords, like write breast cancer, then add only cancer and something on the gene name, and try to see which keywords bring out a particular journal more times. That might be a good exercise to check. But obviously it will come with experience. Like nothing is right or wrong. I believe nothing is right or wrong in this. um, some keywords will just help others to locate your paper easily, more easily than some keywords that you might be choosing. It will come with experience. Your supervisor will choose better keywords for your article than you, because they have read so many papers, they are reviewing papers every day, they are writing grants, they just have a better knowledge regarding this, better hold on this. So obviously they'll choose better keywords than you for the same article. If both of you sit down to write, people experienced will choose better keywords. So that's just how it works out. The main motive is to help people locate your article, because that's very important. It might not sound as important, but it is very important, because there are a lot of articles being published every day, and there are a lot of articles in the same domain of work as well. So if people are searching, and if you do not have good keywords, your article won't come in the top hits. And I think people will go to the second page, third page, fourth page, fifth page, then they'll stop looking. That's how literature review, if they are doing a very extensive literature review, maybe they'll read a lot of papers, otherwise they'll not, and your paper won't come up, and they won't read your paper, and your paper won't have enough citations. So since having citations is also very important. So to have more citations, you have to ensure that you have great keywords, so that people can locate your paper easily and go through it. So that's it. Also, people will definitely choose based on the journal also. People have a tendency of choosing work from a high impact factor journal also. But as I said, they'll not be identical papers, right? If your work is very fascinating and very relevant to them, they'll read your work also. But keywords play a massive role. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So thank you for this question. We'll move on to the what were we discussing? This we have already. Often journals ask for, okay, so this one. Which one of the answer is shown already? Which one of the following sections of a typical research paper is most likely to have lowest readership? I think it's methods. Anybody else having a different opinion? Do you think results might be having the lowest readership, or do you agree with me?
No, ma'am, because part of it would have already been discussed in the abstract, so they would have an idea of what the result of the experiment would be.
Also, it's you're right. Also, if someone is results methods is very technical, right? They are using very technical terms and stuff. So if someone is still deciding if they'll invest their time reading the paper, after the abstract they might read a little bit of the introduction, then they'll directly move to the results and discussion part. So that's how the first skimming of paper is done. When you're reading a paper for the first time, what I used to do before, I used to read every, like, order wise, title, abstract, and that was very boring, because I would not understand many things, and then I'll just stop reading the paper. So that's not how you generally read a paper. Some people might prefer reading like that, but a senior taught me in a different way, and I have been following that ever since. So you go through the title, you read the abstract. Abstract should be very crisp and concise. You read the abstract, then you directly move to the figures. See if you can understand anything from the figures. If there's a bar diagram, if there's a pie chart, if there's a different kind of plot, are you able to understand anything from the figure and the legend? That's why legends below the figures are also very important. Then you'll move to a little bit of the results and discussion part. After everything, if you feel that this paper is worth reading, if you're trying to present this paper somewhere, or if you're trying to replicate the results from this paper, that's when you will go to the methods. Nobody will read the methods in the first glance. People will be interested in the methods only when that paper has a relevance or significance to their work. Like I might enjoy, I work in chemical biology. I am not working in cancer. So I might I might come across a cancer paper. I might find a title very interesting. Suppose I'm reading through a cancer paper, I see they have recognized the target. I'm like, oh wow, cool, that's cool. So I might be interested in the abstract a little bit. I might be interested in the results what they have found out, but I won't normally go and read through the entire method section unless and until I am very interested to replicate that work in my work, replicate that kind of work they have done in my work. Or if I'm very interested, if I think that, oh, this, how did they prove this, how did they show that these many cells are dying, are they doing any particular experiment that I don't know of, then I'll go to the method section and read if they're doing any particular experiment. Otherwise, out of these four options, methods will have the lowest viewership, because after title and abstract, people have a tendency of going through the discussion and results part a little bit, introduction a little bit, discussion, then skimming through the article, and if after everything they find it interesting, that's when they'll go to the method section, because it's the most difficult part, right? Method section, because there are a lot of technical terms, and if you're not exactly working in this field, it will be difficult for you to understand also. So that's why I feel methods is a part with the lowest readership. Anybody else having a different opinion? Okay, so that's why I feel this is the correct answer. This is also the answer is shown. Okay. Oh, this is also very something that we discussed already. So introduction is A, methods is B, C is results, D is discussion. So the first draft is not always written in that order. What do you think you need to write? We have already discussed this. Either it's the IMRAD sequence, IMRD, that's a introduction, methodology, results and discussion, or you can start with the methods first, methods, results, introduction, discussion. So here I have chosen the BCAD option. So moving on to the next question. Often journals ask for the detailed method section as a part of the research article during the submission. The reason being, this also we have discussed, so I'll not go into the details. Their main objective is to allow the other researchers to redo the experiment. They are definitely not checking if the authors are experts in the methodology. That's not their intention at all. And to recommend the use of specific instruments or chemicals, if your paper has gone for review, the reviewers might recommend something. If they send your paper back for revision, they might recommend using some other protocol or some other instrument or some other chemical, but that's definitely not the main reason why they ask for a detailed section, the detailed method section. That the main reason will be to allow other researchers to carry out your work. Okay. Next question. Okay, a group of researchers worked on the natural habitat of a specific species of white tigers living in the Sundarban forest. Sundarban forest is a mangrove area in the delta formed by the confluence of the Ganges, Brahmaputra and Meghna rivers in the Bay of Bengal. Which one of the following options represents a good title for the report? Anybody? Which one do you think has all the details and yet is being very, basically all the details, and it's very self-explanatory? That which one of the four options is more likely to get better readership, better viewership? Which one do you think?
Second option, ma'am.
Correct. Second option has a lot more information than the other three options. They're talking about natural habitat, endangered white tiger species, and they're also talking about the Sundarbans forest. So second option has most of the information, and that's why it's the most relevant. Okay. Next question. Which one of the following, it's also we discussed, but still, which one of the following options is true with regard to the keywords used in the research articles? Anybody? We discussed this already.
Second option.
Correct. So they help the search engines locate relevant papers. That's how the algorithm works. If you add a particular keyword, they'll locate search engines better. Like search engine will locate your paper easily. That will lead to more citations for your paper. So win-win. Next question. A detailed method section is added to the research papers. Therefore, the data obtained are
replicable.
okay. Anybody else? Different opinion?
All of these, ma'am.
Yeah, even I feel it's all of these. So a detailed section is replicable, definitely. That's the most important, but it's also should be verifiable, right? If someone someday posts a question on a public forum saying that your art, your data or your images or your results basically look duplicated or manipulated or modified or fabricated, then someone should follow the exact same protocol that you have done, and they should be able to verify your data. So generally, if something like this happens, I think the paper only asks the authors to verify the data, ask some other student to replicate the data, whatever they have done, and see if they can reproduce the data. So obviously their data should be verifiable. Quantifiable, definitely if you are doing scientific research, I think quantitative representation is very important. Only qualitative or visualizing representation might not work. So obviously quantifiable is also included, and your data should also be verifiable. So that's why your method section is very important. Detailed method section is very important. Next question. The materials and methods section of a typical research article does not include. What does it not include?
Outcome of the study.
Correct. Anybody else? Correct. So the material and method section will have the instrument details, definitely. They'll have the study design of the research project. If there's a particular study design, they'll have that. They'll materials used in the study, obviously. They'll not have the outcome. Outcome will be in the results section. Results, and then in the discussion they'll try to interpret the results, but outcome will not be in the materials and methods section. Typical research article. In a typical research article. Okay. Then moving on to the next question. Which one of the following should be included in the materials and methods section of a typical research article? Which one of the following should be included? Okay. What do you think should be included? Very similar to the last question.
All of these.
Correct. All of these should be included. Find chemicals used in the study. Even when you're writing about any particular reagent, particular chemical, you should also write from where you have purchased it. This lipids are purchased from Avanti Lipid. This reagent was purchased from Sigma. So all of these are very important details that are mentioned in papers. So when people are generally conducting experiments, they don't actually put in a lot of thought. They are like, these reagents are already available in the lab and I'm using it. But when they start to write the paper, that's when they realize that I need to know the proper name of the instruments. I need to know the proper name of the reagents, where they have been purchased from, and all of that. And if they have been taken from some of the other labs, you have to mention that this was a very kind gift from this lab, blah blah, in the material and method section, also in the acknowledgement section. So if you have borrowed something from some lab, you have to mention that properly. So everything is really important. All of these matter. If someone is trying to replicate a data and they are not able to, they should know that they have purchased a particular chemical reagent from some other vendor, from other website, from some other company, not from your company. That's why these things, this is minor details, but they matter a lot. Okay, in scientific communication, the light before heavy principle refers to, anybody?
Second option.
Yeah, correct. So I discussed this last day only. Light before heavy is like, you should not start with a very complex topic at the beginning only. You should always start with a very easily explainable, simple topic, and then you build on that. You build any complex concepts you have, you add on to that. But the light before heavy principle basically refers to this thing only: simple topic followed by a complex concept. So this is the light before heavy. This has been taken from the slide only, lecture slide only. So these are the two sentences. You tell me yourself which sentence is easier to read and easier to understand. The first one is, global warming is threatening polar bears with starvation by shortening their hunting season. Now some people might not even know what global warming is. Okay, but the second statement is, climate change is threatening polar bears with starvation by shortening their hunting season. Climate change is a more generic term, is threatening polar bears with starvation by shortening their hunting season. So that's the easiest sentence to read, so, as compared to the first one. So that's the light before heavy principle. Oh, this already we have discussed. I'll talk about this at the end. So which of the following choices accurately describes the role of the journal editors who handle research papers submitted for review? When you're submitting your articles to journals, there are editors, scientific editors, who are professionals in this domain, and they review your paper. So what do you think is
All of these.
Anybody else? Any other option? Any other opinion? Yeah, it's correct. So all of these. So obviously confidentiality is very important. You can actually, these are unpublished data. So you're trusting the journal. You're trusting the journal editor that this unpublished data will not be leaked under any circumstances. Someone else might easily copy the data and publish it somewhere else. So confidentiality is a very important thing to worry upon. Professionalism, obviously, professional, you should definitely be professional. You should not be biased towards any opinion. You should not be biased towards any kind of data or any kind of relationship between any of the people involved in this entire process. Professionalism is something that is expected from each and every individual. Data protection, definitely also very relevant. Data should be protected from any kind of there's a lot of if there's a data that's very novel, then confidentiality, data protection is very important, because the authors have really worked a lot to get to the results, and some random people cannot publish that if things get leaked. That's why data protection and confidentiality is very important with respect to the role of journal editors. So the image given here represent an example of a figure prepared for a research paper. Here are the two images A and B that are connected with dotted lines and a square in figure A. Which of the following options accurately describes the most likely explanation for such a representation? Anybody?
Third option.
Okay. Anybody else? Any different opinion? So it is the third option. Whenever you're trying to show something like this, it just means that that portion has been magnified, that portion has been zoomed in upon, and it is being shown in a bigger format so that it's easier to visualize. So yes, it's a magnification view of the inset shown on the left image. You're correct. Next question. Writing the discussion section is the most challenging part of a research paper. Some of the some of the pointers that are often used to draft the discussion section are given below, not necessarily in the order of execution. Identify the option that correctly orders this. So which this is M and OP. So inside the discussion section, how will you order your entire study? Read the question once more, and it's a long question. So answer.
First option.
Okay, anybody else? Any other opinion? Yes, so even I feel the first option is the most relevant, because you start with the significance of your discovery and explain its meaning. So discussion section comes after the result section. So you have already written your methods and you have already shown that you've analyzed the data, you have shown the result section. Then you move to the discussion section. So you talk about a little bit, you're moving from the narrow part of the hourglass to the broad part of the hourglass in the base. So you move from how your discovery, whatever you have stumbled upon, why is that significant, and you explain the meaning a little bit. Then you contrast and compare the findings you obtained with those of other research that has been published. Then you try to put that in context with other published work that has already been published before. So that's how you are going to the broader part of the hourglass. You contrast it, you show if there has been other papers have been working on similar kind of things, what are the results that they have ended up with, how can you compare your data with their data, and what are the contrasting findings that you both have stumbled upon. So that's how you contrast and compare the findings. Then you move ahead to describing the study's assumptions. So you always write your limitations, studies limitations, and everything are like that. So it's recommended by journal editors that you actually mention the study's limitations, any weaknesses that your studies have, because the reviewers will find out eventually. They'll understand any kind of limitation that you have. So it's easier to put it out. It's easier that it's better to put it out. It's better that you as an author, you take responsibility that these are the shortcomings, these are the limitations of my work, and these can be addressed using further by further research work in this domain. So you cannot hide anything from the reviewers. So it's better that you only show it. So they know that these people, okay, these authors are completely transparent, they're honest, they have shown integrity, they know that these things are kind of limiting in their studies, but they have explained that nonetheless. So that's how you would get a bonus point for good research integrity. So that's how you describe the study's assumptions, weakness, strength, limitations, everything, shortcomings, everything. Then at the last, you talk about the significance of the work by discussing its application, recommendations, and implications. Basically, you're talking about future research, your future scope. So you're ending the paper with the last part of the discussion by saying that this is the significance of my work, and these are the some of the applications that this can be used in, some of the suggestions, recommendations, and some of the implications. This can be a future very cool future scope of work. So that's how you can move ahead with the discussion part. Great. So moving on to the next question. Science journals frequently require authors to certify that the submitted manuscript is not part of a simultaneous submission. Here, simultaneous submission refers to anybody?
Option B.
B. The same set of authors simultaneously submitting the same work to two or more journals. Okay. Anybody else? Any other option? Any other opinion?
Any of these can be possible.
Any of these? So you think simultaneous submission can mean any of these options?
Ma'am, I like B and C both can be possible. So in that case,
Simultaneous submission journal by two independent groups. Okay. But when you're submitting a journal, submitting an article for a journal, the reviewers, the journal asks the author that please certify if there is any kind of simultaneous submission. So the author would know, right? If there is another group, independent group talking about, they might know, but I don't think that's what they're trying to say here. So they're asking the author that is this a part of simultaneous submission. So I'll tell you what it means. So basically it she's right, it basically means simultaneously submitting the same work results to two or more journals. So some people do that for a greater acceptance rate, you know. So when they're done with the manuscript, they submit to two journals at the same time. So they're like gambling, whichever journal will answer first will publish there and all that. But what if both of these journals say yes? What will you do then? How will you, that's a very risky situation. How will you go ahead? And if you have three or four journals where you have tried to play this game, what if all of these say yes? So we know that the manuscript is the outcome of tremendous personal effort, months of research, long nights of data collecting and management, countless hours of writing and reviewing, until someone finally thinks that it has reached a good enough level to submit for publication. After such an incredible effort and endeavor, it would be only be fair to see your paper published in no time. But this, even the act of submitting has its rights and wrongs and is very often subdued to strict policies concerning the exclusivity of the publication. So in the rush of having a published paper, that's what I was saying, many researchers choose to approach several publishers with the same manuscript in a short period of time without waiting for any kind of acceptance or rejection letters. So this is what we call what we refer to as simultaneous submission. So the whole idea of this is still rather controversial in academia. Is it really fair to ask the authors to give their work away for months in a row until they finally obtain any kind of answer? So that's, it's controversial because some journals take a lot of time to reply. So now that they have worked so hard, they want the things to be published really fast because it's a gamble. It's a game against time, right? It's a race against time. Some other group, from some other random part of the world might be studying about the same exact thing, and if they publish before you, then the entire novelty is gone. Your work, the effort that you have put, the novelty of the work is gone if they publish before you. So it's a race against time. So is it really fair to ask them to wait till they obtain any kind of response? Not to mention that many times the response never even arrives. Some journals never even care to respond. On the other hand, editors, like journal editors, they also spend a lot of time and energy, pressing immense quantities of subs. They have a lot of submitted manuscripts to go through. So they search for novelty, scientific originality, and fresh ideas in order to achieve or maintain high levels of acknowledgement among the scientific community. Furthermore, authors aren't always exactly honest or truthful or aware of the etiquette concerning simultaneous submissions in some situations. They don't tell their potential publisher that they have submitted their paper elsewhere by signing a written statement that they haven't. And in other situations, so and in some other situations, what happens, they fail to inform that their manuscript has been accepted somewhere else. So they are already sent for publication in 2 3 places. One journal has already accepted, so they are publishing there only, but they have forgotten to tell this other editor from this other journal that my journal has already been accepted for publication, please remove that. So the editors are still going through all the art, all the data and all that. So, all things considered, obliging authors to submit their work only to one venue at a time is a way for editors to guarantee that publication exclusiveness and consequently captivate a more refined audience. So that's why some journals ask the authors that sign this thing and tell me that this is the only, this is not part of a simultaneous submission. So at the end of the day, you'll find yourself, basically facing a double-edged sword. On one hand, the most renowned publications demand submission exclusivity. So if you're trying to publish in a very exclusive journal, they'll definitely ask for exclusivity. They'll be like, are you already submitting it to other journal? Then we are not interested. On the other hand, submitting to journals that are okay with this kind of simultaneous submissions improve your chances of a successful acceptance. Or if you're submitting to a journal who is okay with you having submitted this to any other journal as well, that will obviously increase your chances of successful acceptance. So sooner or later, any scientist aiming to see his work published will have to make this choice. The good news is that there are things one can do to increase success in being accepted by publishers, even those with exclusivity policies. For example, a high quality text edited to perfection is the decisive element to achieve their acceptance letter you are longing for. This is the right moment to invest in a translation or text editing service. So that's how journals have a greater chance of being published. So that's how it goes. Some people might even consider this sending work to multiple venues unethical because it breaches the author's promise that his work is original has never been openly. So when you submit a journal article or journal, they have to sign this thing, a very variety of things. So if you are submitting to multiple journals at the same time, you're basically breaching this promise that your work is original and has never been openly seen or published before, because you have already sent to another journal editor. So there are, however, some publishers that don't really have such a strict policy regarding this simultaneous submissions. But is this really the best practice for authors? Yes, if you're looking for a higher acceptance rate, but definitely no if you care about the author's reputation. So some of the reasons that there might be is that researcher or submitter. Submitting a paper countless times is just a sign that you're a restless submitter, but not necessarily interested in improving your work to reach the scientific level expected from a good publisher in your field of study. Also, it's a complete waste of time because submitting for publications takes a lot of time. There are a lot of forms that need to be filled. Publication policies need to be properly read and checked, and if you are repeating this whole process over and over again simultaneously, you are simply just taking time from your important research that could get you far in the future. Similarly, editors will not be really willing to waste time reading manuscripts that won't bring the novelty and exclusivity that they're looking for. Even if you politely decline your publication acceptance because you're doing it with someone else, the odds are that the rejected editor will never read your work in the future. That's what I was saying. So if you have submitted to 2 or more sites, acceptance rate is high. Your journal, your article is already accepted in one journal. So sometimes the authors forget to inform the other journal that their work has been accepted, and the editor is putting in a lot of effort to go through the data. So you see, that's a very no. Ultimately, they'll come to know, and it's a very bad impression. If you also politely let them know that sorry, my work has been published, has been accepted somewhere else, like kindly remove our article from your journal editing. So that will also give a very bad impression to the editor, because the editor is also someone from a very, also very established. So chances are that that editor will have some kind of grudge against you. They'll probably blacklist you, maybe not formally, or maybe not openly, but they'll probably have a grudge against you. Anytime else, if you, next time when you submit a paper, they'll see you as the corresponding author. They'll probably think, oh, this person is already submitted to somewhere else, so what's the point? They'll probably never read your work in the future. And when you send your paper to more than one venue, what will likely happen is that your work will be accepted by two or three less relevant publishers, while still being under consideration by a much better acknowledged one, or even more exciting, by a venue that actually pays. Suppose you have submitted to Nature and they have not replied, but you have submitted to two or three other journals which are not at the level of Nature, but they have already accepted your work. How do you do this? How do you do the math? Do you wait for Nature, or do you go for the publication? So this situation might be really difficult to resolve. Should you risk rejecting the less relevant publishers while you wait for the best venue to accept your submission, or should you rather take the first chance you get at being published? So if you're taking the first chance at getting published, then you're rejecting Nature. Nature might have accepted you too, so you're not waiting for their answer. And in the future, if you want to get something published over there, if your paper goes to the hands of the same editor, chances are that they'll just, you know uh, not take time to go through your research as such. So that's why simultaneous submission is really a tricky point, but basically it means that the same set of authors simultaneously submits the same work to two or more journals. Okay, so that's the answer. Then moving on to the next question. A group of students created a slide presentation to explain gluten, a protein naturally found in some grains. Examine the slide and select the appropriate critique from the options provided below. Why do you think this is not a good slide at all? Which options do you think are the reason?
All of these, ma'am.
All of these. Anyone else? Correct. Too dark background image. The background image is very. It has a lot of stuff. It does, and there's only, you know, it doesn't add to any kind of thing to the information, to the content. Too many colors. There's blue, gray, red, green. Like if someone is sitting in a auditorium, they'll not be able to focus on one thing. They'll not be able to read properly, and someone sitting at the back bench, they'll not be able to read at all. Then the color contrast of the fonts with the background, very hard to read. So all of these options are actually relevant. So this is not a great practice when you're making slides. Very bad, because it's very pressurizing on the eyes as well. So this does not work at all. Try to make everything simple, that will attract, that will be visually more attractive. She's correct. All of these. So next question. The majority. Sorry.
Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Yes.
Actually, there was a previous question, the fifth question. Actually, I have a doubt in that, ma'am.
Simultaneous submission.
I don't find
Acha,
the
I've missed.
question here.
Okay, tell me. Yeah.
It is based on whether like the science journals often publishing. It's based on the publishing rights basically. So I didn't
Okay.
get a question that was asked. So
Can you
I
repeat the question?
I'll read out the question to you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Science journals often obtain publishing rights from authors before publishing the work of the authors in the journal. Which one
Okay.
of the following options is not true with
Okay.
regard to the publishing rights transferred to the journal?
Okay.
So this was the questions, ma'am. And the options were preventing the authors from republishing data and figures on commercial websites or in books,
Okay.
preventing the authors from republishing their data and figures in thesis and lab
Yes, ma'am. This is the
Yeah,
one.
the order is just messed up. Yeah. Science journals often obtain publishing rights from authors before publishing the work of the authors in the journal. So they have decided that they'll accept the article, I'm guessing. Which one of the following options is not true with regard to the publishing rights transferred to the journal? The question is a little confusing. Which of the options is not true with regard to the publishing rights transferred to the journal? Okay. It prevents the authors from republishing the data and figures on commercial websites or books. I think it'll, if you have already given the publishing rights to one particular journal, you cannot republish the same data without giving citation. If you're, I personally believe that, I might be wrong, from my limited experience, because I've never been a corresponding author. So I think I'll need to read this publishing right wala contract before saying anything, because I believe there'll be a contract kind of thing when the corresponding author, the supervisor, they'll read the contract and they'll sign. Basically a contract between the journal and the supervisor, the corresponding author. So I'll need to read their publishing rights, and I am pretty sure all journals will have at least little bit difference in the contract. So what I feel is that if you have already given the publishing rights to an to a journal for publication, and if that article has not been published yet, you should not, like, it's basic, you should not, the authors should not publish their data or figures or any kind of, be it commercial website or books. Basically that's still unpublished data, and that's still unpublished data because that not been put online yet. And if you have already given the publishing right to a journal, you definitely should not go ahead and put it somewhere. If you have given the publishing right to a journal and if the paper has been published, then I think you can, depending on the whatever contract you have signed, it depends on that also. Ba- like very basic, like from my own experience of reading papers, I am just saying, if you have already, if the paper is already published, then you might be able to put some kind of data somewhere, but giving proper citation to the journal. Even if it's your work, you should give proper citation, or proper not acknowledgement, proper citation or reference to the journal, if that is allowed in the publishing rights, preventing the authors from republishing their data and figures in thesis and lab reports. Thesis and lab reports, I think, if someone has done the work, they'll definitely write it in the thesis. But I have seen my seniors do, when they're explaining data, she explains everything, then she writes at the end that this thing has already been published. If it's published data, then she'll write that this entire work has been published in this paper dash dash et al, year of publication, journal in which is published. So she is giving, because she has done the work, she is the first author, she has talked about the data, then she has given the main figure, the workflow, the main graphical abstract of the paper. It's the same, she has already published the paper, so the graphical abstract was made by her only, it's her doing only. So she just copies that, then she gives appropriate reference, like it's her paper, she's citing her own paper in a thesis, then she's writing that this, the entire results have been shown, have already been published in this paper, that has already been published. So I think thesis and lab reports, thesis though very important, lab reports depends on how important it is. If it's your dissertation, MSc dissertation and thesis, any kind of dissertation or thesis, you need to show the data. You cannot move ahead, right? Because that's your work. Thesis, you'll get a degree once you submit your thesis. That's your doctorate degree you're getting after you submitted the thesis. So you have to, if your paper has been published, you write that, you give the reference of the paper, or you at least write. Uh, Generally, theses are not published online, even though I see some of the theses being published online, but I'm believing all that data that has been shown in the thesis have already been published in proper articles. That's why now they are online. But generally, unpublished data containing thesis should not be put online. I feel that unless and until it's already been published, it's I think it might be loss for the author. Third option is preventing authors from publicly sharing the published articles on their website and another similar. If the article has already been published, I don't think there should be any problem in sharing it in any website. It's already published, so you're sharing that article only. So when you're sharing the published article, it will show the journal, the year, and everything. Similar, if we're publishing in public form, I think that should be fine. Then preventing authors from claiming copyright for the text and images after the article has been published. Okay, this is dicey. I think this is it depends on what has been mentioned in the publishing rights, to be very honest. If the preventing authors from claiming copyright for the text and images after the article has been published, if you've already willingly published it into a journal, why would you then claim copyright? Like, copyright is generally claimed when someone else takes your work and publishes them as their own. That's when we do copyright, right? When someone is taking work that I have already done, they're using that and they're publishing that under their own name. That's when we claim copyright. But if I have willingly submitted my article to a journal, I've willingly done everything, the journal has my name as the first author, the journal is acknowledging that I am the person who has done the majority of the work, then why will I claim copyright? I'm not actually understanding this option properly. But everything boils down to the publishing rights. I think it depends on how your corresponding author has signed the contract. So I'm not exactly sure what this question wants to say. It's not true with regard to publishing rights. It's not true. Which of the following options is not true with regard to the publishing rights transferred to the journal? Transfer to the journal. So yeah, I think the first option will be you cannot republish. That's true. Preventing the authors from republishing data and figures. Okay, so I'm completely confused with the question. How is it framed? Not true. What is not true? Preventing the authors or true? It doesn't. Anyway, so the first option, as I said, it should not be allowed. If you have already given publishing rights to a journal, We can move to the next question. Uh, the following is a statement with two sections that are denoted by blue and red font colors. Examine the statement and select the option that is true with regard to the guidelines followed in a research paper or project. A research publication frequently adheres to a standard format for citations, and such formats ensure that ethical guidelines are adhered to correctly. What do you think? Which option do you think is correct?
Option C, ma'am. The
Option
second
C,
blue
yeah.
is correct.
Yeah, blue is correct because every journal has a particular way of citations. They can form the AAPA style, they can form the MLA style. They have a standard format for citations that whenever you are sending out a paper for publication, they'll mention that. So you have to definitely follow that. But such formats obviously cannot ensure that ethical guidelines are followed. Such formats cannot ensure that you are actually citing all the papers that you have talked about. So ethical guidelines is upon you. They can do plagiarism check with different softwares like Turnitin or what's the other software? Urkund. They have there are others. I'm not sure of the pronunciation. Urkund or Turnitin. They can do plagiarism check, but having a standard format for citations is never enough for deciding if their ethical guidelines are all followed correctly. So yes, you're right. Statement one is statement in blue color is correct. Statement in red color is not correct. Next question. Which of the following is not an effective method for displaying the overall trend of a large data set? Anybody?
Sir, tables, madam.
So obviously, if there's a large data set, bar diagrams, pie chart, line diagram, these are very uh, popular ways of displaying the overall trend because visual representation is better. Tables, we are writing stuff, you're adding some values. That's not exactly a very effective visual method for displaying the overall trend. Trend, if you are showing bar diagrams, any kind of charts, diagrams, uh, plots, those are better ways of effectively showing any kind of data. So a group of students created a novel strain of an infectious fungus whose spores caused skin irritation when they came in contact with human skin. Students wished to determine if the newly developed virus was infectious. It would have been fungus. Where is virus coming from? Anyway, based on your knowledge of research ethics, choose the committee that needs not to be approached for permission to conduct the proposed research.
The animal ethics.
Institutional Animal Committee.
Yeah, okay. So according to the question, obviously, if you are checking if it's infectious when it comes to contact with human skin, that means at some point of your research, you're going to try it with a human. So obviously, that will, if you're using human subjects, that's a huge trial that you need to go through. Definitely. Biosafety committee is also very important. Even people who are working with any kind of infectious virus like SARS-CoV-2 or any kind of infectious bacteria like Mycobacterium tuberculosis, there's a lot of BSL 3 labs need to biosafety level 3 labs with all the required facilities need to be used. So all these are biosafety committee uh, that you need to ensure. All of these you have to follow all the protocols, all the policies and everything. Animal ethics, if you are not directly working on any animal model, I think you don't need to do any animal ethics committee. But I think before going to human subjects, I think there must be an in vivo or animal model research going on. Like even if you're checking on human skin, I'm not sure because I have not done this type of work yet. You don't jump from cell lines to a human subject directly. I think there's a mid ground where you work on animal ethics committee. That's more regarding biology and less regarding this introduction to scientific communication course. So if you're not working on any animal model, then fine, you don't need to approach any animal ethics committee. But if you are working on any animal model, then I think definitely animal committee needs to be approached. So we'll stop here, but I wanted to discuss a little bit about the inductive and deductive reasoning before we stop. So as we discussed before also, inductive and deductive reasoning, there are two modes of reasoning. But I think Mayur asked in one of the classes if we can actually combine the study. So I read somewhere, I actually went through Google and I searched if there are scenarios where people have combined both inductive and deductive reasoning. So while they can be very different, they are also very complementary. And in some cases, researchers actually plan for their study to include multiple components, one inductive and the other deductive. And in other cases, the researcher might begin their study planning to utilize only one approach, but then discover along the way that the other approach is needed to help, highlight the findings. So there was an example that they had given. What they had shown is that uh, they wanted to do a study, no, that in which they could take actually both deductive and inductive reasoning. They were actually searching, they actually worked on a collaborative research. I think Dr. Amy Blackstone, they were working on a collaborative research on sexual harassment. So what they did was that they began the study knowing that they would like to take both deductive and inductive approach in their work. So they therefore administered a quantitative survey, the responses to which they could analyze in order to test the hypothesis, and also conduct a few qualitative interviews with a number of the survey participants. So the survey data could be well suited to a deductive approach. They could analyze those data to test hypotheses that were generated based on the theories of harassment. And the interview data can be well suited to an inductive approach. So they looked for patterns across the interviews and then tried to make sense of those patterns by theorizing about them. So this is one of the very popular studies that in which they have tried to incorporate both inductive and deductive reasoning to, but it's quite popular. I think in social science research might be quite popular, but in scientific research I have seen mostly deductive reasoning only. So we'll stop here today. Anybody has any more doubts? This is the last session of last live session of this course. If you still have any doubts, do write in the discussion forum. We'll try to address the questions as per our knowledge. So this is the last live session for this course from me. So tomorrow there's another live session, so from another TA. So anybody, any question, or we could conclude this session? Yes, Hemant has raised hand. Yes. Okay. If there's no question, we can maybe conclude the meeting today. And thank you so much. Yes. Any question? Thank you so much. We can probably stop the meeting. Thank you.